Oh, yes.
I didn't think about that.
Bienvenue, welcome to another property podcast. This is Property Matters, one of 4 important podcasts that we put out every week, covering all aspects of the property market. We on Property Matters tend to discuss things that affect what is going on in the property industry, often from the point of view of the domestic side. Hamish McClay, who helps us set it up, welcome to the show. And special guest today is Paul Coombs from Compass, who's going to be giving us some salient advice and some useful information shortly. But obviously, to start us off, Hamish McClay.
Well, good afternoon, and bright, sunny afternoon here in Oxford. I trust the same finds you wherever you happen to be. And it's definitely another sign that spring is just around the corner. In fact, we've got the equinox coming up. If you don't know what the equinox is, don't worry about it. I'll tell you another time. However, we know that it's getting lighter in those evenings and the stuff's starting to grow. But unfortunately, we're approaching various times where there are yet more impositions upon what's going on within the property industry. Now, we're fully aware that we had a bit of a damp squid of a sort of both an autumn statement from the government and also whatever they call this spring thing. It used to be we called a budget, but we don't call it that any longer. But part and parcel of what is happening is relevant to government moves and industry moves and all the rest of it. And something which a lot of people have had a challenge with for many, many years now and don't consider it to be or consider it to be an erroneous tax. It's yet another tax that is sort of being imposed upon us amongst all the other taxes is land tax or stamp duty or SDLT, stamp duty land tax. And that's been as is for quite some time, and it's up to the government. They can choose to change it as and when they like. However, what they've done now, our poor solicitors, our legal beavers and conveyancers, in the past, they've tried very hard to assist their clients in getting on board with what stamp duty they have to pay, but it has become so darn complicated now. And if anything goes wrong, it comes out of their PI cover because their client's going to get back to them and say, hey, you didn't tell us about this, you didn't tell us about that. And it can have a serious impact. But the law is changing. And we'll let Paul explain it in greater detail because he understands the technicalities of that. But we, if you like, in the industry search and convey, and as a member of IPSA, as well as many people will know, we try and help solicitors out in terms of trying to soften various blows to make it easier and quicker to carry out transactions. So the sort of information that Paul is bringing us today is a reminder to solicitors, particularly conveyancers, anybody within, but private individuals as well, should they wish to know what they're liable for in stamp duty when they actually go to purchase a property. Basically, what Paul will actually speak about is just a brief introduction. That's all. It's one of those complex beasties. But Paul will give us some sort of greater details on it to let us know what the imposition is. It's not that any people are going to be paying more stamp duty at this particular sort of stage. It's more to do with the imposition on the solicitors and part of their brief to add just another chore to the conveyancing scenario to make it just that little bit more difficult and a little bit more complicated. And unfortunately for solicitors, it's another bit of heavy work that they would never have been expected to be able to. They don't want to become tax advisors, financial advisors. They've got enough to get on with. They've got enough responsibilities.
Paul, welcome to the show. It is before we get into it, I should tell everybody, I'm remiss of me. Today's topic is SDLT rules tighten. What solicitors face next? And it, as Hamish so politely said, it appears like solicitors having more work and the same pay. Have I misunderstood it?
Thanks, Gareth, and thanks, Hamish, as well. No, I think you're probably about right, Gareth, and I think that's why a lot of conveyancers are up in arms with the forthcoming changes that HMRC are bringing in, and perhaps quite rightly. But that's not necessarily for me to judge on that. But yeah, once again, there's yet another task being put in front of conveyancers, which, in all honesty, they're not going to be qualified to do. Certainly not on the more complex tax matters and the complex properties that are likely to come up. So, yeah, as a very brief overview, obviously the stamp duty changes that have come in over the last few years have generated huge amounts of work in terms of generating peaks and troughs for conveyancers. And we know what an impact that can have in terms of timescales and everything else. Well, this year, we've got something else to contend with, which is stamp duty related, which isn't going to be to peaks and troughs in terms of volumes of transactions, but is now down to the fact that from 18th of May this year, law firms who want to continue submitting SDLT returns will need to register with HMRC as a tax advisor. And this is a particular bone of contention for them, of course.
They're not tax advisors per se, are they? I mean, they never consider themselves that.
No, and I think this is where the real challenge comes in, because for years, most law firms will tell you that, well, we cover this off in our client care letter. We have a disclaimer that says we don't give tax advice. If it gets really complicated, we might involve an accountant. Well, the problem is that from this year, you will be a registered tax advisor with HMRC. So there's going to be a real blur in how can you, on one hand, put in a client care letter, we're not a tax advisor, we don't give tax advice, when you are listed with HMRC as a tax advisor. So that's going to be, that's a real challenge for law firms. And I just want to also say that whilst this, obviously this podcast is really about what's happening next, the truth of it is the challenge of stamp duty has been going on for years. And actually there are huge amounts of claims every single year where stamp duty has been incorrectly calculated, and then firms are getting fines and interest. And I've obviously spoken to a lot of firms recently about this, and someone said to me, well, you never hear about that. Well, with the best will in the world, nobody puts their hands up to say, and no one writes a blog to say how we made a mess on a stamp duty calculation. But if anybody wants some great examples of that, we've got some fantastic case studies on the Compass website, and they're not necessarily what people think, where they'll say, well, I only deal with relatively straightforward transactions, Paul, all right? If you look at the matters that are on there, they're not people buying agricultural estates where there's been issues. Some of these are second-time buyers, and the complexity has been around the fact that they're staircasing their shared ownership property to buy their second one. How does that work then? In terms of, is there subsale relief on the stamp duty payable, for example? We had one, I think it was the back end of last year that it actually came in, where the client, the law firm advised the client that on a holiday lodge there was no stamp duty payable. 12 months down the line, it's come out the woodwork that indeed there was stamp duty payable. It was to the tune of about £3,500, but it will now be plus fees, plus interest. Now, technically, the buyer is still liable for that, but you can guarantee that buyer is going to dig their heels in with that law firm and say, well, you told me a year ago there was no stamp duty payable.
Well, especially now they're going to become tax advisors, they're going to be very much more held liable for this sort of information. It sounds crazy.
Well, the reality is, and I know this from, I've spent 20-something years working in the legal sector and with law firms, and the reason why you don't hear about this is because often with that sort of amount, let's say it's £4,000 with interest and fines, if that client digs their heels in and they're making a noise about it, the chances are the law firm will just pay that out of their office account. So there won't be a PII claim. There won't be a big noise around it. The client will just go away happy that they didn't have to pay the stamp duty.
Right. So what you're saying is the legal entities will roll over and just suck it up because they without admitting any kind of guilt. Yes.
I think often that's what happens. I mean, I think it probably depends on the site. I mean, I can only go off sort of our own knowledge from matters that we've dealt with and some anecdotal stuff from the last 20 odd years I've been involved in the sector. But obviously, if we're talking about a huge claim, then that's likely to become an indemnity claim. But often, same as any sort of insurance, there's a level of which it's not worth involving your insurer and just dealing with it in-house. So we know that these claims happen on a regular basis. So again, a lot of firms will sort of say, well, actually, we don't think it's that big an issue. Well, actually, all of a sudden you're going to be under far more scrutiny. It's as simple as that. And one point that I was talking to somebody about this week, and I think somebody didn't. This was a point that I was discussing with somebody, and it really seemed to the penny dropped on them. And I said, you do realise that once you've registered as a tax advisor, HMRC will suddenly have at their disposal a wealth of data on who's submitting stamp duty land tax returns, what reliefs are being applied, how many corrections are being done afterwards. So they're suddenly going to have a huge amount of data on that. And who's to say that they won't be looking for trends in there? Is that going to make them sort of start looking at particular law firms or tax advisors as okay, well, why are we finding that this particular firm is applying these reliefs on 20% of their matters, for example? So the scrutiny is going to be there, and how law firms deal with it. Obviously, I'm representing Compass on this podcast today, but there will be a range of solutions out there. But I think the one thing that law firms don't want to do is bury their heads in the sand and just say it's business as usual, because I don't think for a second it is.
So it's going to be more onerous. You're going to be required to potentially provide more information, and at the same point, you're signing up to be a tax advisor. It doesn't sound like a big payday for solicitors.
Well, once again, it's just another element that is being thrown under the conveyancer's hat. And the reality is how much stuff over the years has happened. We've had environmental searches where law firms in the past have had to say, look, I can't interpret that. My wife's actually a conveyancer, so I'm very in tune with what goes on in the market and the pressures that they're put under. It's not just the hat I wear today. This is something I've been very involved in for a long time, so I'm well aware of the pressures that they're put under and what they're expected to know. And you'd be amazed what the layman thinks a conveyancer does. I know she's been asked by people if she could give advice on the structural quality of a house, which is not obviously part of a conveyancer's job. The level of confusion the man in the street has over this. So it's great saying we don't give stamp duty advice. I guarantee you that 99% of clients don't read those client care letters in the fullest detail that they probably should. And
well, I suspect it's the same number of people who read those terms and conditions statements given from Microsoft.
Well, the time that they will read them is if they decide they're not happy with the service. But the point that they're buying a house, the world is happy. All they want is that key. They sign the terms, and their next question is, when can we complete? That's it. They want to crack on. But I guarantee if that stamp duty is done incorrectly, and that example I gave you before about the holiday lodge,
right?
That's a great one. There's no way that client is just going to say, oh, yeah, that's fine. Don't worry about it. I'll pay it now. It's not going to happen. They will dig their heels in. And whether it's right or wrong, I guess that the law firm could resist it. But it's whether it's worth it in that scenario. Is it worth resisting it? Do you find a compromise? Do they pay it all? Do they split the difference? Depends how difficult the client is ultimately, doesn't it? And I just
also I suspect the last thing they want is any kind of besmirchment on their good character. So if they have it in their petty cash, effectively, they'll just cover it off. Hamish, it appears to me that I should be buying my fish from the library and maybe getting my steaks from the travel agent. I can't understand why they're lumping yet more jobs onto our conveyancers that they're not really specifically supposed to be doing.
But there's several other aspects as well. There's the conveyancers have got a big challenge on. Sorry about my voice. Conveyancers are working very, very hard all of the time anyway, because they're constantly under pressure. Because as Paul intimated there, they just want that key. They just want to get in there. They're not interested. They don't want these particular hold-ups. They just want to be able to sort of get on with it.
Right.
But when the so the conveyancer turns out and then says, hold on, I've got to get this information together. We've got another form to fill in. We need to check out the tax side of things. I can't guarantee you this. Can you imagine that? I can't guarantee this to be correct. Would you like me to submit that kind of information? However, if instead of having the solicitor having or the conveyancer having to work on this particular aspect, they were able to turn around. One of the great things to me, with particularly the environmental reports that Paul mentioned, which is part also of the conveyancing transaction. One of the great things is the people working with that particular sort of type of report, they are the experts. And because we are helping, if you like, conveyancers out by providing with that particular report, should any query come up, or it seems to be in a flood area, or it seems to be that there's some building going on next door, any sort of queries that actually sort of come up, the environmental people can answer the questions on behalf of the solicitor. The solicitor does not need to advise professionally about anything environmental because of the people we deal with. Now, this is exactly the same type of thing. The quality of service which is provided by Compass, very appropriate name actually, because that Compass will help you in so many different sort of ways, in so many different directions, because they are experts. And if anything gets really serious, they know exactly who to actually get in touch with. Now, people who are buying directly themselves, who are buying the property, they can actually, through Compass as well, they can establish what they might be able to expect to pay. They don't need to actually sort of sign up to Compass, but it's not actual guidance. But they could themselves, if they really wanted to know, they could work directly with Compass on this particular one. But the conveyancer can actually work through Compass. They don't have that particular, if you like, that massive, great sort of backpack that they've got to lump around with them, worrying, is this the right information? Is it not right? Because all of the liability, and Paul, all the liability falls on Compass. There's no liabilities whatsoever as far as the solicitor is concerned, because the solicitor has passed over that area of responsibility, but they are passing it into good hands. It's not as though they're passing it to any person. Compass have been working on this for years now. And as Paul said, stamp duty hasn't just started, but the responsibility of the solicitors is just looming very, very high, as they're meant to be now tax advisors. What will that do to their PI cover?
Paul, would you like to have the last word before I pass back to Hamish to finish us and round us out?
Yeah, I mean, as Hamish has just suggested, I mean, essentially that's what Compass are offering for firms that want to fully outsource. We've got a solution which involves us liaising directly with the client, doing a calculation which is indemnified, and submitting the return to HMRC, which is crucial for the firms that don't want to register with HMRC as a tax advisor. But equally for those firms that decide, you know what, we want to register, but we're just going to adjust some of our internal processes, we can still work with them. We've got solutions where we can assist on an ad hoc basis with more complex transactions. And we also have a tool that can help identify upfront risk at the point that someone instructs them on a purchase.
So what kind of people would be best to get in touch with you, Paul, so that they can avail of the good service that Compass provides?
It's predominantly law firms that we work with. As Hamish said, we do have direct clients that come to us as well. That's generally been in the past when a law firm has already said, this is too complex for us. Go and seek your own advice, or in some circumstances, they do. The law firm directs them to us on an ad hoc basis. However, right now, the conversations we're having with firms are slightly different in that a lot of them are sort of coming to us saying, look, we don't want to do anything to a stamp duty anymore. We want to outsource it fully. What does your solution look like, and how can you help us? And one of the things that we're offering, which I think is unique in the marketplace, is that we're offering a fee. It's not based on property price. It's based on where the firm itself is located. And that fee includes the calculation and submission, commercial and residential property, any level of transaction, any level of complexity. So it is off their hands. And what that also means is when they quote, the price that we'll be able to give them will be ideal for meeting the SRA transparency rules, which state that at the point that someone gets a quote from you, the quote itself has to be completely transparent. So there's no uplift with our service. It's not a case of we've got so far down the line, now we've realised this is actually a really complex stamp duty matter, so now we're going to charge you another £500. It doesn't work that way with ours. It's a flat fee. Essentially, we're taking the risk on that. It's a blended approach where, across a year, there'll be some complex, some medium, some more simple ones, and we take that risk. So we think it's not only is it great for stamp duty compliance, it's great for compliance across the board, because it will help ensure that they're not falling foul of other SRA requirements.
Well, no, it's great, as I'm sure our audience will appreciate. The fact you've taken the SRA into account means that you're on the ball and are best suited to work with on an ongoing basis with legal entities. Hamish, would you care to take us home, please?
Well, I think it's it's one of those great things that we're able to bring together experts, bring the right sort of people up, because very often what we do is tend to find within conveyancing, certain people come along and really they're not offering a solution as such. They just want to charge money just so they can actually sort of make money out of it.
Right.
And there's a lot of that going on, and there's so much factory conveyancing. And even within that factory conveyancing, if should anybody want to use a factory conveyancer, what Paul is offering through Compass is an excellent sort of way of going around that. But more particularly, when we're thinking about that high street solicitor, that high street conveyancer, and it can be, it doesn't really matter, but the important thing is no longer will that conveyancer have to be held responsible for tax advice. And
wow.
I think that is the most important thing. And the prices are unbelievably low. You would not expect the particular sort of price to be as low as that compared to the price of the stamp duty. And what I love about what Compass are offering, it's a flat rate throughout England outside of London. I mean, London's slightly higher, obviously, because there's much more involved there. Also, if you like, the way things operate in London. So it's marginally higher there, but not much higher. And it's slightly different in Wales, because Wales operate in a marginally sort of different way. But it's incredibly well priced, and it's a quite significant solution. And from my particular perspective, in helping conveyancers to carry out transactions more readily without pain, we tried to take that pain away. Something like that Compass are offering is absolutely fit for purpose and really spot on, because all the indemnity, all the insurance cover is there. So there's no challenge whatsoever, because it's up to sort of £2 million indemnity. I think it was actually Paul said. But don't worry, we'll get Paul on again a little bit further on down the line, just as a brief reminder of the time actually sort of coming forth. But as I said, it's not just conveyancers that can make access to Compass. It is that private individual as well. But we've got an event sort of coming up later on in the week, one of our podcasts, which Gareth would likely have mentioned anyway, which is called our Property Quorum. And
Yes.
we're bringing in, I was going to say protagonists, where we will certainly have somebody with a great deal of experience within the property market, and hopefully we'll have one of our solicitors along, maybe two of our solicitors along, to carry on with the discussion, because what we'll be speaking about then, the things that can hold up conveyancing, and certainly looking at the stamp duty and stamp duty, if you like, compliance is going to be one of those important factors. So we get another chance to get Paul explain within that, if you like, within this larger area of discussion, that very old subject. But we'll certainly get Paul back again, I'm sure. All right.
Marvellous. And Paul, thank you so much for being here today. Of course, Hamish McClay, our Lord and Master, who helped set this thing up in the first place. Let me regale you with what we have left for you this week as far as property podcasting is concerned. Tomorrow, we are celebrating all things IPSA, Independent Personal Search Agents, the association thereof that Hamish is currently chairman of. We talk more detail about searching. We'll have, I think, Jackie, who is one of the people who helped set the thing up in the first place. It was very full of knowledge and great stories, all to do with the IPSA cause. That's on Wednesday. On Thursday, of course, we have that bun fight we just mentioned, which Property Quorum, where we have really knowledgeable people. As Hamish and I have said many a time, I'm sure you'd agree, Paul, surround yourself with people with knowledge and people with experience, and you're likely not to go far wrong. And of course, on Friday, we have our, in many ways, most popular show, which perhaps is an indictment of the current safety rules, which is called Cladding Matters. We don't just talk about cladding, we talk about building safety and all the stuff therein. Do come along for that. That's an excellent show. That's is it 1 p.m. this week? It was 2 p.m. last week to accommodate one of our excellent contributors, but it'll be 1 p.m. this week. So just to recap, IPSA kind of magic tomorrow at 1 p.m. At 10 a.m. on Thursday, it's Property Quorum, and 1 p.m. on Friday, it's Cladding Matters. Thank you so much, both of you, and to all of you attending. Please keep your feet on the ground, keep reaching for the stars, and please, in these troubled times, look after your mental health. Until next time, bye-bye.
Thank you.